Welcome to another Griff's Conversation, this time with iconic Blue Jays broadcaster Buck Martinez, former Major League catcher through the 80s, platoon with Ernie Whitt. We're going to get into that sort of conversation. But first, your off season. I know you've got a fishing trip coming up to Panama that was part of the Jays Care Foundation, which you set up. And when is that going to happen?
Richard, that'll take place in February. We leave and go to Panama on February 7th, and we're going to a terrific place called Tropic Star Lodge in Panama, literally in the middle of the jungle. And it's pretty exciting. Fishing for big billfish. We'll fish for 7 days, and we've had a great Jays Care supporter from Nova Scotia that's purchased the package, and a good friend of mine from Northport. He's going to go along as my mate, so it'll be a week of great bill fishing down there in Panama.
So that's the fish that is popular down there that
Yeah,
you're going to catch? Yeah.
at that time of the year, it's a black marlin season. There's some sailfish around, blue marlin. Is chance to catch dolphin, wahoo, tuna, literally anything. And then there's inshore fishing too, which you can catch cubera snapper and roosterfish, and it's quite an assortment. One of the greatest destinations for big game fishing in the entire world.
Are you going to visit the hometown of Mariano Rivera?
You know what? It's not too far away, but Leo Jimenez is not too far away either.
That's
He's
right. Yeah.
from Las Tunas, Panama, and I asked him about that when I was thinking about my trip, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "You'll have a great time down there." So he will be down there sometime during the off season, but I'm sure right now, as we're in the middle of January, he'll probably be heading to Dunedin real soon.
Just two words of advice. First is stay away from either end of the Panama Canal because the president-elect says the Chinese have control, and I don't think they're big into fishing. And
You know what? I've been through the canal before. It's quite a scene, and I'm sure this will all get ironed out before too long.
the second piece of advice is don't bring your Barry Manilow collection because that's what drove Noriega out of the palace back in the day. I remember that. I remember that much about Panama.
Absolutely.
Um, and the funny thing is, that's not the only. I will get into some of the charity work that you do later on in the conversation. But I mean, I was watching a telecast, and you and Dan were on, and you guys do a fabulous job, one of the best in all baseball. And Dan was talking about his contribution to the Jays Care auction, which was dinner with two fans in New York City on a road trip. And instead of just letting it lie, you said, "Can I come?" Now, usually guys are trying to get out of stuff like that, but you're inviting yourself along. I mean, what is it about fans and people that attracts you and gives you joy?
You know, Richard, I think that's why I'm still doing this job. I absolutely love bringing the game of baseball to the fans. And as you know, the fans in Canada have treated me so well since I first came as a player in 1981. And then a short, brief tenure as a manager, but then back in the broadcast booth in 2010 when I came back with Sportsnet. But the fans, literally from coast to coast, have been so supportive. And anytime I can interact with them, and you know what? You know this. You've been around the game your whole life. Anytime you can react with a fan and give them a personal relationship and just spend 5 minutes with them, shake a hand, take a picture, anything like that, it's a memory that'll last them for a lifetime. And it's such a small little gesture that we can do. But Dan and I have good rapport, as you mentioned, and I think we're pretty entertaining at dinner as well.
Yeah, I can guarantee that is true. But there's one incident you might not remember, but I certainly do, that I want to tell the listeners. It was the first road trip in 2019 of my first year in PR with the Blue Jays. And as you mentioned, I've been a lifetime in baseball. So I started in '73 with the Expos, and then came to the Toronto Star in '95, replacing our good friend Dave Perkins, and then went to the Blue Jays in 2019. So it was the first road trip, and we go to Cleveland. And Mark Shapiro had given me the task of visiting a private suite on the level just below the press box because there was a couple in their 40s that were renewing their vows because the husband had cancer and didn't have long to live. So they were big Blue Jays fans, wanted to go to the game, wanted to renew their vows, and it might be their last chance. And so I took a bunch of swag down to the suite earlier. And if you recall, there was sort of a rain delay and the game didn't start on time. So I went down and I gave them a Justin Smoke bat and greetings from different players and people. And then I went back upstairs. They were thrilled. I went back upstairs, sat down with you and Tabby in the dining room, and I told you what had happened. And after about 2 seconds, you said, "Let's go." And I said, "What?" And you said, "Let's go down the suite. I'm going to visit." And I went, "Holy crap." Nobody asked Buck Martinez to go, but he's going on his own because he knows that in a situation like this, it could have impact. And you're absolutely right. It had such a tremendous impact. And later on, the gentleman passed away, but like the whole group that was in that suite appreciated it. I just wanted to let you know that I still remember that as one of my fond early memories as Blue Jays PR guy.
You know what? I actually remember that. I remember going down to the suite, and there was a big family there, a lot of family and friends there, and they were all there to celebrate this great relationship. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that I would later on come down with cancer myself, and
Yeah.
and so many fans have reached out to me. So, you understand things as you get older, obviously. I wish I had this knowledge I have at 76 when I was 21. I'd have been a hell of a ball player.
It seems to me that God always remembers acts of kindness. So that's why you beat cancer and are back in the booth and still going
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your time as a player and the relationship with Ernie Whitt, because I talked to Ernie and I asked him about, was there any little bits of friction, because you both wanted to play and neither one was Johnny Bench or Gary Carter, but only one could play at a time. How would you describe that relationship? I wouldn't say it was contentious. You were teammates, but was there a little bit of, hey, that you wanted to play every day, especially since you played mostly as a platoon against left-handed starters?
Yeah, you're right. It was a different situation. When I came to Toronto, I wasn't welcomed with open arms by the players in general because there was a catcher named Dan Whitmer that was very, very popular with the players. And I know there was a lot of friction because I was a little bit older than everybody else. I'd come from the Milwaukee Brewers and I'd played in Kansas City a long time. I believe it was my 11th or 12th year in the big leagues. And there was some friction there. But Ernie and I got along really well. And, Pat Gillick had talked to me when I first got there. When I arrived at Exhibition Stadium, he told me what he wanted from me. He said, "I want you to help our pitchers get better, and I want you to do whatever you can to help Ernie Whitt." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." And obviously, at that point in my career, I had played longer than I thought. I did not play. This is interesting. I didn't realize this until many years later, but I got traded. Buck Rogers was the manager in Milwaukee, and of course, you know Buck very well from Montreal. But he called me in the office about the 8th or 9th of May, and I had not played an inning or had an at bat the entire season. I sat there. I was the fourth string catcher on the Milwaukee Brewers. We had Ned Yost, Charlie Moore, myself, and Ted Simmons. And of course, Ted Simmons came from the Cardinals in the offseason. Charlie moved to right field. Ned Yost stayed as a young catcher, and I moved on. But yeah, it was interesting. But when I got there, Ernie knew who I was, of course, and I had had some success with the Blue Jays, or I mean, with the Royals. We played in the playoffs in '76. And, I think a lot of it had to do, especially in 1982, with Bobby Cox. When Bobby Cox came in as the manager, he explained the situation. I remember my meeting specifically with him at the end of spring training in 1982. He called me in the office. He said, "Listen, you've had a good spring. Ernie's had a good spring. I don't see there's much difference between the both of you. You're going to play against lefties. He's going to play against righties. Have a good year." And that was the
Wow.
meeting.
Yeah,
So
that's terrific.
that's how good he was. And Coxey did that with everybody. He let him know what he expected. And he would also let you know if things changed. But yeah, Ernie and I got along well. And I think at the first, there were certain pitchers that we handled particularly well. And we stayed with those pitchers for a while. I don't think it was a straight caddy situation, but when the times called for it, we would stay with those pitchers.
Who was assigned the Dave Stieb catching role? Because
Oh,
I don't know, I think he
we both
probably
drew
would have got
straws.
along as
Yeah,
poorly with either one of you.
we drew straws. Whoever got the short straw got Dave Steve.
The story about no at bats through whatever reminds me of Ken Maka. I mean, Ken Maka was a good utility guy. He was played multiple positions, and he went on, of course, to manage in Oakland, and I think had a stint with the Pirates. But there was 1979 when the Expos had no disablements all year. Chris Spire was DL for 15 days surrounding the All-Star break so they could use the 3 days as his part of his 15 days, but nobody else was DL. There were 12 or 14 pitchers for the entire season, and every position player was healthy all year. So Ken Maka ended the year with like 12 at bats or something. And the next year in the press guide, I put in his biography, which was very short, I was looking for highlights. I said, throws good batting practice. And he got so mad at me.
I'm sure he did.
But
But Kenny played with us in '81 in Toronto, and
yeah,
he's one of the more senior guys on the team too. And yeah, it was there were so many guys that came through Toronto at that point, and I have nothing but great memories as a player playing for the Blue Jays, and a lot of that had to do with the impact of Bobby Cox.
yeah. My the the when you see young college, I mean, I've heard you numerous times now that I'm just on my own griffthepitch.com website. There's a blatant plug of my stuff. But I hear you guys talking and I notice all these young pitching coaches that are college guys, that are stats guys, metrics guys.
Mhm.
And it bothers me a little bit to see them walking to the mound because there's a veteran pitcher out there who probably looking askance at some kid coming out trying to tell him stuff. I mean, do you ever think that? I don't think you ever say it that often on TV, but like the Twins have a guy and there's other teams. Do you ever say what happened to coaching staffs?
Oh, I do it all the time, and I've had coaches tell me, so especially some senior coaches, and I'm not going to name any names, but guys that have been with the Blue Jays in recent years. And, there was always a tradition, and you saw this all the time when you were working with the Expos, that coaches would go out 1:30, 2 o'clock, stand on the field, and have a reunion of sorts. First game in the series, the coaches would go out there and they'd catch up with everything. Hey, what do you know about the Red Sox? How are the Orioles doing? And this one particular coach told me, I can't go out there anymore because I don't know anybody. They're all 35 to 38-year-old guys that never played in the big league. So you can't talk to them about anything other than spin rate and exit velocity and, you know, lateral jumps and routes and everything else. They can't talk about, what's going on with players or who's hot and who's doing good things. And you got to watch out for this guy with the 3-2 count in the sixth inning in Baltimore and, all those different things that lead to winning games. It's not there anymore. Everything is black and white. Everything is a computer printout, and everybody has the same information. And that's what gets me more than anything. Nobody
That's
understands if you
that's
no,
the
nobody understands if you step outside the box, you're going to be different. And
yeah.
that's what I see with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are so good because they have three of the best players in the world that play for the team. They've done all they play for is the winning. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that was the end of Moneyball when everybody has the same information and everybody's doing the same thing. I
Same
mean,
thing.
now
Yeah,
you got to find something
same.
else.
You
What
could
was
take the
outside the box is now inside the box, and
yeah,
let's go. Let's play
you
ball.
could take the names off the uniforms and the game would look the same. Uh,
Which leads me to a question about the change, because I know that catcher, and it's all changed since you were catching, and even since the beginning of the 21st century. There's a catcher's meeting you would plot with your pitcher pregame what you would be doing your third or fourth time through the order, what changes, what you could save in your repertoire, what you didn't need to use. And if it was working, just keep going and then surprise them the third or fourth time through. Right now, it's like all out all the time. And if you reach 90 pitches, oh man, that was such a good, you're a workhorse. I mean, what is wrong with using intelligence of pitchers and catchers to maximize the stuff that they have to carry them as deep into a game as they can?
Well, Richard, you can't really blame the players because they've been told everything to do since they signed professional contracts. And even in the minor leagues, they're told on what pitch to throw, how many pitches to throw, when to throw this pitch, when to throw that pitch. So there's no real feel for the game behind the plate. And it's not their fault. It's just the way the game has gone. And when I've talked to Max Scherzer and I've talked to Garrett Cole about this, I said, you guys have gotten to the point where everything is max effort. You throw every pitch to every batter, every inning, from the first inning to the sixth or seventh inning, your last inning of the game. I said, did you ever think about pitching like a Greg Maddux or Tom Glavine or Rick Russell? Did you ever think about that style of pitching? And both of them, and I told my son this not long ago, I said, both of them said you couldn't pitch like that nowadays. He said, the hitters are too good. I don't believe that.
I don't
I
believe it
think
either.
if you look at the guys, and we had two great examples in Toronto recently, in Mark Burley and Hyunjin Ryu. And they both couldn't puff your lip from 40 feet if they hit you in the mouth, but they could pitch and they could get you out. And there's another thing that I thought was really interesting. And Mark Burley always talked about not having a meeting, not going on a game plan, just throwing what the catcher
Oh,
called.
that
And
was one of
now,
my favorites. He said that it didn't matter if it was a different catcher. He would throw what he wanted, so it would be an entirely different game plan that hitters didn't know what he was going to be throwing. He just
well,
had
and
to
did you
execute.
catch this? Did you catch this offseason? When Chris Sale won the Cy Young Award, he complimented his catchers because he said, I don't game plan, I don't look at video, and I don't shake off pitches.
Yeah,
How about
perfect.
that?
Yeah, no, that's a throwback
Pitching.
to, and
You
he
know
won the
what?
Cy.
If you
So
think about it, I always told my pitchers, I said, you know what? The wrong pitch with conviction is a better pitch than the right pitch with doubt. And if you think about that, it makes all the sense in the world. If you doubt as a pitcher this next pitch that you're going to throw, you won't have any success. If you throw a pitch with conviction, as long as you commit that pitch, it might not be the right pitch in that situation, but because you've committed it to it and you've effectively thrown it, it's going to be effective. It's interesting in that regard.
yeah, I mean the game has changed a lot, but to me, any pitcher now under 30 years old is who's a starter is just a glorified opener. I mean,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
opener pitches maybe 2 innings max. Starters now pitch 4 or 5. So
Yeah. Well, and you know what? You go back to pitching coach walking to the mound. I think of Bob Gibson, and I think of guys coming to the mound, and he's like, "What are you going to do out here?" Jack Morris. I mean, he told Sparky Anderson. He told Sparky, he goes, "What are you doing out here? You don't have anybody in the bullpen that's any better than me right now. So get back in the dugout."
absolutely, I miss those days. Obviously, um, we go on YouTube now, and you can still see 15 or 20 angles on your double play at the plate
Yeah,
with Phil Bradley and Gorman Thomas. I mean, I don't think it was any great deal getting Gorman Thomas trying to circle the bases at his speed. But when you see that, I mean, what do you remember from the actual moment, from the throw from right field, the collision, trying to throw to third base, and then receiving a throw back almost on your back and making the tag? I mean, live, if you hadn't seen all those video replays, what would you remember live?
I remember everything about it. In fact, there was a play the inning before that was very similar. Jim Presley was at third base, and there was a sacrifice fly hit to right field, and Jesse Barfield made a terrific throw on the first base side of home plate. I grabbed it and dove back over home plate and tagged out Presley for a double play. That was the previous inning. And when I came in from the dugout into the dugout, I said, Jesse, nice throw, but next time throw it on the other side of home plate. And wouldn't you know it, the very next inning, the situation unfolded with Phil Bradley at second base. Gorman Thomas hit a ball past Damaso Garcia into right field. We weren't scoring anything, and I put myself in front of home plate, and I said, nobody's scoring on this play. Because Jesse was a terrific thrower, maybe the best I ever had, and made a perfect one-hop throw right where I wanted it, up the third base line a little bit. And at the same time I caught the ball, Phil Bradley hit me on my shoulder. I dislocated my ankle, broke my leg. And Larry Young was the home plate umpire. And he said, show me the ball, show me the ball. And I held the ball up. And as I did, I looked at shortstop, and Gorman Thomas was running from short to third. So I tried to throw it to Garth Orge at third, and it went down the left field line. Now, this is the miracle of the entire play. George Bell picked it up and threw a one-hop strike to home plate.
That is a miracle. But
And I was pushing around on my butt to get in the right position to make a tag on Gorman. And I fortunately caught the ball, tagged Gorman in the same action, and that was it. That was the end of my season.
here's an observation. None of that would have happened in this day and age because the throw would have been a lob to the first baseman at cutoff, and you wouldn't have had put yourself in that, or Jesse Barfield wouldn't have put you in that situation. So
That's for sure.
you were playing well ahead of your time.
Yeah.
The accident, the broken leg, which was a serious injury. I mean, I remember Moises Alou's injury, and that was gruesome. But I mean, you made an out on that play, 2 outs, or no, 1 out, 2 outs. Yeah, 2 outs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the next year, 1987,
86.
1986, you hit 181, and you played 81 games. And that was pretty much the end. Your wife, Arlene, told you after the season, that's it. Take the broadcast job. But do you think that injury shortened your career?
I don't know that it had much to do with the end of my career. I think more than anything, Rich, from the moment I came back to Toronto, rehabbing my leg and my ankle, I worked hard. I was hopeful of getting into the postseason to stay on the roster and maybe make it to the World Series, which was, ludicrous. Even if I had gotten healthy enough to play, I hadn't played since July. So, that was out of the picture. But what happened was I was so concerned about making the team in 86 that I worked all winter long. I did aerobics 3 classes a day all winter long to get ready for the 86 season. In spring training, I had a pretty good spring, made the team. I remember the first play I had at home plate in spring training. Bobby Meacham of the Yankees slid into home plate, and I put a tag on him, and I went, oh, my leg's going to stand up all right. So that was a big milestone for me. But once I made the team, Jimmy Williams was the manager. He said, hey, you're going to make the team, and you and Ernie will do the same thing again. I stopped working. I just kind of relaxed and said, okay, I've done it. And at that point, I was about 37 years old. I had a great career. It was time to move on. And it probably curtailed my career a bit, but I wouldn't say any more than maybe 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, you played 81 games, which is probably what you would expect a platoon catcher to do. But
Right.
You only had 160 at bats, so it seems like you were pinch hit for by Ernie, maybe in the middle of games and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because it wasn't the workload that you had previously.
No.
And then you became a broadcaster after you had turned it down, and then Arlene told you, shake yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But you and I share a moment that I'll never forget, and you'll never forget, is Cal Ripken's trot around the warning track, his saving baseball at the time, because we hadn't got into the saving baseball steroids era. This was a saving baseball accomplishment of admiration and stick-withedness that I've taught my kids. I've pointed to Cal Ripken taking his glove out there every day for that many days in a row. But you and I shared that. You were in the booth with Chris Berman, with Boomer, and you gave it an appropriate silent treatment when that happened, when the 5th inning, when he was making his way around the bases, and the game was delayed had to be like 20 minutes. because
or at least.
they had the ceremonies and then but is that a moment? And I think you won a sports Emmy for that too,
Yeah.
for not
And
saying anything, which is
it,
ironic.
it exactly, but it tells you, it sums up my career as a player and a broadcaster. Everybody remembers me for a broken leg as a player, and everybody remembers that I didn't talk for 22 minutes as a broadcaster.
Nice.
But that was a terrific night. That, you know what? And I got to tell you a story that not many people know. That Chris Berman and I were doing the ESPN game Wednesday nights all season long, and that game fell on a Wednesday night. And ESPN front office wanted Joe Morgan to do the game. Obviously, Joe Morgan, the Hall of Famer and a terrific broadcaster. And Chris Berman stood up for me and said, no. He said, this is Buck's game. This is what we've been doing all year long, and it falls on our schedule, and I want him in the booth with me. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
He stood up for me. And, you know, a lot of people have their own opinion about Chris Berman, but I will never forget that. And it's interesting that he texts me every anniversary of the Cal Ripken game. And
Wow.
this year he said, 30 years, Uncle Bucky, 30 years.
I love Boomer. I've always loved him before that. In fact, little known fact, and you'll appreciate this. He asked me to teach him the Canadian national anthem in French. So
Yeah.
I laid it out phonetically for him, and we went over and over and over, and he did it on air, and that was one of my other proud moments.
Yeah, he was tremendous. He had tremendous respect for the teams and for the players and for the cities and countries that he worked in. And he always had something to throw in there to add some little local life about Hotel California, for instance. One of
Yeah,
his great calls, you know, Chris was a very, very, and still is a very wise broadcaster. So early in his career, he had a chance to broadcast baseball games, and he knew he was a novice at it. He had done Sports Center, and he was very good on the news and very, very good at delivering it with Sports Center. But he knew that if he was going to do baseball, he had to get his feet on the ground. So he did the late night game in California, the West Coast games that started at 10 o'clock Eastern. So it wasn't the great exposure. It wasn't the great attention, you know, prime time in New York. And he did the Hotel California. That was his
yeah.
thing. A lot of San Diego games, a lot of Dodger games, and everything else. Well, one night, and you may know this or not, but Chris sang with the Eagles on several different occasions. And he got up on stage and he would sing with them. So one night he's doing an open in San Diego, quoting Hotel California. And he's got pictures of the beach and the palms and everything else. And about in the third stanza, you hear whack. First pitch of the ball game is a home run, and it's flying through the palm trees. He missed the first pitch.
Well, he can be forgiven. And the other thing, or one of the things I admire about Chris is that he understood that to fans, he was a cartoonish type figure because of all his nicknames and whatever. But he never carried that into like when fans interacted with him outside the ballpark. He never interacted and tried to be that guy. He would just tried to
Yeah.
be himself. And if that wasn't good enough, then, leave. And I admired that because there were so many times that people were stopping him on the street or going to an event, and
Yeah.
he would just try and show them who he really was.
He taught me one of the most important lessons of my broadcast career. When we first started working together at ESPN, he would say, "Good job, Uncle Bucky. Let's go down and see the important people." So we would go down to the truck and we
Yeah.
would stop in and he would say, "Good job, director. Good job, sound. Audio, great job. Producing." Because he had a good friend, Jay Cutler, who was the producer. So he would always give him something. But he was so good. We would go to the truck before the game, and Jay would give him the video for the open. And he'd say, "Let me see the video, 30-second video. You know, Joe Morgan hits a home run, Bob Boone scores. This guy, Steve Carlton, had a great game." Bowman looks at it for 30 seconds, takes a little notepad from the hotel, and writes out the open like that.
Yeah.
He had a tremendous mind. He could do that. He said that he called him Stevie Weinstein, but he called him Stevie Weinstein. He said, Stevie, let me see the open. So he'd let him show them in the open, and he would fit the words perfectly to the pictures for a terrific open.
Now I want to get to a somewhat controversial period of your career. Um, being manager for a year and a half.
Yep.
I remember the opening press conference, which was at I think NFL Canada headquarters up on L'Esplanade, and it was like a theater type thing. And I asked you a question. There was a bunch of people there, a lot of people there, and Paul Godfrey was going through the story of you suggesting there had to be a roof on a new stadium and the other stuff that he remembered from the mid 80s when they were planning on building Skydome.
It had to
Um,
be a retractable roof.
yes, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was the innovative part of it. But
Yep.
I stuck my hand up and I asked a question about Buck, since 1987, you haven't been in a major league clubhouse before March 1st as a broadcaster. Don't you think that a new generation, this was late 99, so it was in time for the 2000 season, right?
Time for the 2001. And I signed in
Oh,
November
that's
of
right, 2001, because JP fired you in 2002. But that was a question that I thought was legit. In hindsight, what did you learn that you didn't know because you hadn't been in a clubhouse before March 1st at spring training, and now you had to be?
the game had changed dramatically in 14 years. And that's what I learned. And, when, I had some coaches that suggested, well, we can't do that. The players won't do that. I said, we can do whatever we want. We're running the show here. But you know what? He was right. And the players had changed to the point where, I think of Gene Mock. I mean, you know him as well as anybody. And think of the great managers over the years, Dick Williams, terrific disciplinarians, Billy Martin, Earl Weaver. All of those managers were the ultimate ruler. They were the guys that had to say, he's on the team, he's not on the team, this guy's on my team, it's my team, I'm going to pick the team. That had changed dramatically. The power had gone to the front office, and the players understood that to the point where sometimes the players even got to, call the GM and say, hey, this isn't going right. This isn't going right. And, I had a couple players early in my first year sit down, and after a game, I said, we're not scoring any runs. I think I'd like to move the lineup a little bit. And I was talking to one player in particular, and he said, that's a great idea. Let me go get the other guy and we'll talk about it. And they both came in my office. They sat on my couch. I said, well, what do you think? Yeah, that's fine. We're good with that. I said, all right, that wasn't such a bad deal. So I jump in the shower, get out of the shower. Gordon Ash calls me and says, man, now you've made everybody mad. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they just called their agent and they're bitching about the change in the lineup. I wouldn't even dry from my shower yet.
The I do remember the first day of spring training in the first full squad workout in '01, and we were at the Bobby Maddox complex, and it was still that old rickety complex, and the media was waiting, and there was a lot of media there. Media was waiting because the manager always comes to talk after a workout, and usually Howie or Jay Stenhouse had to go in and find the manager and bring him out. You came looking for us. It's like, where are you? Oh, you want to do it here? Okay, let's do it here. And I'm, well, oh, this isn't going to last. How long did that last?
It lasted quite a while. I don't think I ever felt like the media had anything to do with my outcome. I felt like everybody was fairly reasonable and awfully fair with me. Obviously, I had a lot of relationship with all of the media guys from my playing days, so it wasn't that big a deal. And I firmly believe that once the front office makes up their mind about something, you're not going to change it no matter what you write, how many good things you write or how many bad things you write. Once the front office makes up their mind about making a decision, they're going to go through with it. So yeah, that was a fate. I knew that at the start of the season.
How important was your choice of Cookie Rojas as a coach?
Cookie Rojas and Mark Connor and Garth Orge were tremendous. They were my handpicked guys. And as you know, Cookie and Mark quit when I was fired, and Garth Orge was fired. So they got rid of all of my guys at the same time.
The I remember in '02 because '01 was the first winter meetings for the new general manager. '02 was your second season. Oh, the other story I love to recall is the opening day of '01 was in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, that
And
was
so
pretty cool.
I'm sitting next to you in the dugout at Iran Bitorn Stadium, and all of a sudden you come into the dugout, sit down, and there's a rush of San Juan and Puerto Rican camera crews coming over to interview you. And I remember you holding up your hands and going, I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish well enough. And like these guys all just sagged. You could see their shoulders sag because Buck
Yeah.
Martinez, they thought, okay, we'll get our interviews. But I mean, that was a big moment for first game as a manager. How much did that mean to you emotionally?
Yeah, it was tremendous because I had played in that ballpark for Santurce. My first 2 years in winter ball were in Santurce in that same ballpark, Iran Bithorn Stadium. And obviously, your first game, it was so unique because we got to start in San Juan. My wife was with me. We had a lot of young Puerto Rican players in our organization that we took down there for that series. Felipe Lopez, Miguel Negron, Luis Lopez. They weren't on the team, but we let them play in the exhibition game the day before. You'll remember we played an exhibition game, then
Right.
we opened with a one-game series against Texas. And yeah, it was a pretty special time. I met some friends there for the first time. They were guests of MLB, and we're still friends to this day. Chris and Holly, and yeah, we met them, and it was pretty cool. It was great to be back in that ballpark because I had so many memories. My first winter ball game, Frank Robinson was my manager, and Roberto Clemente was the manager of San Juan.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Pretty
Uh,
special.
the last discussion about your managerial career I'm going to have is from my viewpoint as a writer, as a columnist. I remember in May, there were the drumbeat was that you were going to be fired. And there were sources who didn't know when or so I wrote a column because I'd been around the game a long time and I said they will likely do it going to Detroit because they can win in Detroit. Teams like to change managers when the team is on the road. And yeah, so look for it to happen going to Detroit if it happens at all. And they let you go to Detroit, and I'm blaming myself for although it added 3 wins to your win
Right,
total.
our win streak.
You
Yeah,
were
we won
three
a
and
three
zero,
game
and then you
series.
you came back with the team, and on the off day, after winning 3 in a row in Detroit, the general manager let you go. That was from my viewpoint. I felt not guilty about it, but I felt like that you were pissed off at me at that point.
Now,
What was what was your
you know,
viewpoint?
Richard, I knew I was going to get fired the first time I met with the general manager. So
Okay.
it was a big shock.
Yeah.
So what the interesting aspect of that was we were playing Tampa Bay, and my high school teammate, my college teammate, called me up and said, "Hey, my son-in-law has just been called up by the Rays. Can you say hi to him?" I said, "I'll take him to lunch." So Jason Jimenez was a left-handed pitcher that got called up, and Arlene and I took him to lunch, and we told some great stories about Kenny Hopman, my college teammate, who debuted with the Chicago White Sox, and his first at bat came when I was catching for the Royals. He had 16 at bats in his whole major league career, and I was behind the plate when he got his first at bat. But we were
Wow.
so young, we didn't even appreciate the moment. But anyway, Jason Jimenez has lunch with me. I say, "Hey Jay, I'll see you at the ballpark a little later." He said, "Okay." I get to the ballpark, get called up to the office, get fired. Jason comes out on the field and goes, "Where's Buck?" So yeah,
Yeah,
that was a tough time. But one of the great moments of that whole situation was Hal McRae was the manager of Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
And he and Garth Orge, they came to my apartment that night, and Arlene and we all sat around and talked about the good times. It was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Well, to me, that's the greatest thing about baseball is friendships that never die, that never go away. And it can be 20 years in between, 25, 30, whatever it is. And you go back and you see somebody that you've known over time, and it's like no time has elapsed.
You know what? I always talk about that when it happens, because when that happens, it's never been where you've been. It's always how you've been.
Yeah. So then after that moment, the GM was still with the Blue Jays, so you went to the Orioles to get back in the broadcast booth.
Right.
Did you ever did you ever think that you would be coming back to the Blue Jays?
No, never did. It took me, I would say it took me a solid 3 years as a broadcaster for the Orioles to ever step on the field at Rogers Center. And
Wow.
you know how important that is to me as a
Yeah.
broadcaster.
Oh God, yeah.
And I just was never comfortable going back on the field. And in 2009, Rick Briggs Jude was with Rogers Sportsnet at the time. And he asked me if I could have lunch with him in September in Toronto. I said, sure, we'll have lunch. Briggsy and I are good friends, and we play golf a lot. I said, yeah, no problem. He said, I want you to come back to Toronto. I said, I'm not coming back to Toronto. I was having a great run in Baltimore, and there was no reason for me to go back to Toronto. I said, as the front office is aligned right now, I'm not coming back. He said, well, that's not a problem. So then he asked me, he said, I want you to be the play-by-play guy. I said, well, do you think I can do that? And he goes, yeah. He said, your XM experience on the XM radio is giving me a lot of confidence that you can handle the play-by-play. So, yeah, that worked out, and I came back in 2010.
Briggsy was he cut his teeth producing the Expos games when it was starting
Right.
up on TSN. And so I got to know him pretty well there. We drove a couple of times from San Diego to LA so I could drink beer on the way and he could drive. So he was my designated driver a few times.
Yeah.
But when you did come back, I was always impressed when spring training, that first and second spring training, whenever you had somebody that might be your partner, you were on the field every day with that person, whether it be Tabby or whoever. And you guys wanted to be so much on the same page and understand the ebb and flow of your conversations and what he knew and what you knew, and to mesh them together. That by the time you got in a booth, it's like you had been partners for a year. Why was that so important to you? And I saw Mike Schmidt take a broadcast job, but he's a Hall of Famer and you're not. But he took a broadcast job and just showed up for the game, and that was it. And he told stories about himself, and that was it. It was not the way to do it, the way you did it. Tell us about your passion for what I just described.
Well, Richard, first of all, I don't have as many good stories like Mike Schmidt. But secondly, I told this to Dan Shulman, and I think he's mentioned it publicly a few times. I said when Dan first came in, I was very disappointed because I'd lost my partner Jim Hewson. And Huey, of course, he's from Montreal. He came over to the Blue Jays, and we had that great run that led up to 92 and 93 World Series. And, every game we did had an impact on the pennant race. And then Jim went back to BC and became a hockey announcer, something he always wanted to do, go back to home. And Dan came in, and I said, Dan, my goal as a broadcaster is to sound as if we're sitting at the ballpark, drinking a beer, telling the fans what's going on. And it's always been something I'm passionate about. It's not about us. Nobody ever turns on the game and says, hey, Buck Martinez is doing the game tonight. Let's watch. No, it's about bringing the game to the fans. And that's one thing that I've never really been able to convince the players of. I'm not there to embarrass you. I'm there to bring your personality to the fans because they don't have the time to do that. But if I can tell a story about something that you did as a kid playing baseball, or that you did as a minor leaguer to help another guy, or that you've learned from another major leaguer what helps you become the player you are, those are the stories people want to hear. They don't want to hear exit velocity and launch angle and how far that home run came. They want to know what makes that guy so special. Why is Mookie Betts such a great player? Why does this little guy that weighs 170 pounds hit the ball like Aaron Judge and steal bases like Ricky Henderson? Those are the things people want to hear. They can read all the numbers they want to themselves. It's all on every website in the world. But they can't tell you what I learned at the ballpark at 3:30 talking to the coaches, managers, and players of every single game I do.
And you never miss one. When I interviewed or I had a conversation, I don't like to call them interviews. When I had a conversation with Pat Tabler, we talked about the fact that among 30 major league teams, the local broadcast of the Blue Jays sounds more like a national broadcast because there's no cheering in the press box other than get up, get up, get out of here, that sort of thing. but by and large, I wondered if there are wives and girlfriends and families who ever get back to you and say, Buck, you criticized so and so. You said he couldn't do this or he needs to improve in this. Does that happen to you? Because you've got to walk through that crowd a
You
lot.
know, it's only happened to me one time, and it was a player. Well, I'll take that back. It happened my first year.
Yeah.
And Bob Elliott came up to me one day in spring training and says, "Hey, how do you feel about the players not talking to you?" I didn't realize they weren't talking to me. He goes, "Oh, yeah, what you said last night about Ernie and Lloyd Mosby, nobody's talking to you anymore." I said, "What?" I couldn't even think of what I said. But what happened was I was on Pat Marsden's show. And this is my first year, 1987. There was talk of a Ernie Whitt for Lance Parrish trade. Sil Campusano playing center and Mosby moving to left and George Bell moving to the DH role. You remember all that
Yeah.
controversy. So Pat Marsden, obviously, much like Rich Griffin, had very pointed questions. And he said, "What do you think about the trade of Ernie Whitt and this and that?" And I said, "Well, you know what? Ernie's never really been an everyday player, and Lance Parrish is an everyday player with big time power. He hits 30 home runs. So I said that would be a pretty good move for the Blue Jays. And what do you think about Campusano taking over?" I said, "Campusano's a tremendous center fielder. And I don't think Lloyd Mosby is in the upper echelon defensively of center fielders, but he might be the best left fielder in the league if he moves to left field." That created a thunderstorm. Wow. So now the next day, Bob comes up to me and he says this and that and that. So I wanted to quit. I mean, these were my teammates like 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And now they're not talking to me. I wanted to quit. But you know who saved me?
Who's that?
Tony Kubek. Tony Kubek was doing games as well with the Blue Jays at that time. And he said, "Listen, you didn't criticize their morality. You didn't question their character. You put your opinion out there as a 17-year major league player. That has credibility. And don't ever forget that." But that was one of the toughest lessons I ever learned, to remind myself that I have a right to an opinion. I played for Joe Gordon. I played for Bob Lemon. I played for Jack McKeon. I played for Whitey Herzog. I played for Bobby Cox. I was around the best in the business for 17 years. So my opinion has some backbone.
Yeah.
And I can say I never question, "Hey, that guy was out last night. He looks like he's hungover," and never any of those things. I don't care about that. I say there's a different way he could have done that. He chose to do it this way. Better option might have been to do it that way. And you know, another thing that people have criticized me, and like I don't get criticized very often, but they say, "Well, how does he know what they're talking about on the mound?" Because he's saying, "Well, you know, this is what they're talking about." And how does he know? Well, I was out there for
Absolutely.
a large part of my life.
Absolutely. There's no question. And anyone who knows that you know what you're talking about in those situations. It reminds me of when I left the Expos in 1995. hanging out with players after games, going out for a beer late, going landing in a new city and going for a last call somewhere with the players, getting back to the hotel at what 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And then I moved to the Star and started covering the Blue Jays. And I would see players, players, some that I knew out, and they would immediately head for the hills, like turning on
Yeah.
the lights in the kitchen with the cockroaches, they would head for the hills. And I had to tell a few of them, hey, you will never read anything from me because I was there, I know what it's, I know that at 7:30 night game, if you're out till 2, you can still get your sleep. It's
All
not
right.
going to affect you. And a lot of times it's good for you to wind down, but it was something that a lot of players never get over, So I'm
Yeah.
sure that the same situation with Buck the broadcaster as opposed to Buck the player.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was different. And, nowadays you don't see players out. They just don't go out. They stay in their
No.
room and they play video games. And it's a different game now.
Yeah.
There's so much money at stake, and I can understand that.
And
And
social media, you
this
get
is
caught.
this has
Yeah.
ruined those late night beer
Oh,
sessions
for
where you talk
sure.
baseball.
Absolutely. Another thing before we get into the winding this conversation up,
I apologize for my son's dog. He's noticing something outside.
oh, I had my dog under the table here and he got bored and he left. So, um, another thing I admire about what I've seen with you over the years is that you make sure that during the middle of the season, you and Arlene go on a vacation, a lot of times to Europe or somewhere away from baseball. You mentioned it, I thought of that when you said that she was in Puerto Rico for the opener in 2001. And that was that the first time that you guys would have traveled together? And is that evolve into a mid-season break, or did you just feel that you needed that? Because the mid-season breaks were even before you got ill.
Oh yeah, no question. It's something that my wife was a flight attendant, so she's used to traveling quite a bit. And yeah, this last year we took a trip in July. Upcoming July, we're going to take a trip for a 50th wedding anniversary. So I will miss most of the games in July once again. So yeah, it's been something. It's a good break. It gives me an opportunity to clear my mind. And at one point I was doing as many as 150 games, and
Yeah.
now my schedule is down to 100. Which everybody goes, 100? That's a lot. I go, oh, it's nothing in a baseball. So I have basically 2 months off, so I get to pick and choose my schedule. But yeah, we travel quite a bit, and we love it.
The health scare that you had, and we've talked about it briefly before, but when you were off with cancer and people were sending their well wishes and the outpouring of emotion from fans and the people that helped you, I think you traveled to Houston for some treatment. Is that correct? Or
What's
um,
that?
that you traveled to Houston to get some treatment sometimes
Oh yeah,
for,
yeah. No, we went to Houston for about 8 weeks.
yeah. And like, were you surprised at the outpouring of affection, especially when you came back and people were just crazy about seeing you back at it?
Yeah, I was tremendously caught off guard. There's no question about it. The fans from the moment, we made a statement early on. I'm going to be off the air for a while. I've got something I got to take care of, and I'm dealing with cancer. So they knew why I was away. But people from all walks of life got in touch with me, and then when I came back on the 26th of July and broadcast that game, we went to commercial break in the second inning, and we didn't go to break. And you'll remember that's when the players came out on the field and acknowledged my return to the
Yeah.
booth.
Yeah, that's cool.
Me as much as anything. It was
Yeah.
tremendous.
It's I think that the baseball gods are just looking kindly on you because of all the stuff that you've done. And I just want to wrap up this conversation with talk about your efforts with B.A.T, which is a tremendous organization, former players and those within the game who take care of players who have fallen on hard times. Could you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah,
And
it's
what your role is, that you're the
president.
president? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm the
how does that
president of
work?
the baseball assistance team, and it was, you're right, it was an idea of players. It was founded in 1986 by Major League Baseball players, and they always felt like there were players that had fallen through the cracks. Obviously, baseball players didn't always make the money that we're seeing nowadays, and a lot of baseball players never realize that they're going to be a former baseball player much longer than they are an active baseball player, and they have to have some kind of uh, opportunity to create a nice lifestyle and continue to live comfortably the rest of their life. And a lot of them aren't prepared for that, and there are certain things that they can't handle. B.A.T handles situations of medical concerns, drug and alcohol abuse, mental issues, financial issues. People fall on hard times financially. It is not a pension. It's not a lifetime pension. It's a short-term bridge to get people back on their feet once again. But we have eligibility standards, but we reach the entire baseball family, whether you're in the front office, whether you're a minor leaguer, it could be a minor league umpire, it could be a minor league clubhouse attendant, people on the grounds crew we've helped. But we have helped people from infants that need heart surgeries to infants that have brain tumors to major league players that have drug and alcohol abuse problems. We have professional counselors at our disposal. We have counselors in Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and we reach out to a lot of people. But anybody that's concerned about it and anybody that sees this, you can go on the MLB website and scroll to the bottom of the website, and it'll have other MLB associations. And under that, you'll see the baseball assistance team. It's called B.A.T. And we at B.A.T take a lot of pride. We have helped over 11,000 families to the tune of almost $70 million since the inception in 1986. It's pretty incredible.
Buck, I know that you run or that you part of the organization of meetings throughout spring training. In every camp, you have an hour to present to players, 40-man rosters as they're there. And to me, the greatest thing about charity work by players and by athletes is not what you see in the newspapers or what you see on broadcasts. It's what they do behind the scenes. And you could probably address, I know Kendrys Morales at one time just gave such a stunning amount of his time and energy and money to B.A.T. Can you talk about some how important it is that these charitable works that aren't in the public are happening and players are basically good?
Yeah, and that's what I want everybody to understand. The entire organization of B.A.T is funded by active major league players and coaches and managers. We have a meeting, as Rich mentioned, in spring training with all 30 ball clubs, and we meet with them. And generally, we may have a recipient of B.A.T who has been a benefactor of some of B.A.T's goodwill. And I know we have had youngsters that have been helped that come in there. A recent one is Camden Carter, who at 4 years old had a brain tumor. And Camden had to have multiple surgeries, and he's lost the vision in his eye. He plays baseball, and he went 0 for 36 without contact in his baseball season, and then got his first hit and finished the season on a 6 game hit streak. Now, here's a young man that's 11 years old playing baseball with one eye who loves the game so much, and B.A.T's been able to help him. And his father was a minor league pitcher in the Yankees organization and never made it to the big leagues. And we have helped him with a lot of medical expenses and a lot of therapy. And it's pretty encouraging. But Camden has gone to clubhouses and he has touched a lot of major league players. And I got to tell you, he played tic-tac-toe with Francisco Lindor. Kyle Schwarber gave him an autographed bat and inscribed it, "I hope you hit a lot of bombs with this bat." And those types of things, people don't get to see that side of these major league players, but there are an awful lot of good guys in the big leagues that are wealthy and can handle all of this, and they contribute a heck of a lot of money. Last spring, we collected over $4.3 million from the active Major League Baseball players.
On that note, Buck, I appreciate it. We went a little long, but I loved every minute of it. So Thanks for the conversation, and we'll see you in the spring, and have a good trip to Panama. Stay safe, put the life jacket on, and remember that the Pacific Ocean is on your east.
All right, man. Great to have you. Thanks for having me, Rich, and we'll see you in spring training.
All right. Thanks, Buck. I appreciate it.